Good morning. All right, yeah, I know I'm not on any kind of schedule today. I just got a lot going on later today, but I wanted to make sure uh to do wake up stories because that helps me, just as much as uh reading a story to other people. I like getting ready for my day with reading, and we are on book 2 of Everworld, Land of Loss. And we got a really neat inside cover there. So I'm just gonna read chapter 1 this time because, like I said, I got things to do today, and we will move on from there. So, book 2, Everworld, Land of Loss, chapter 1. In the real world, the Vikings never fought the Aztecs. This was not the real world. I had a sword in my hand. My fingers were so tight around the hilt that blood was seeping from my cuticles. My breath came in shallow gasps. So little air, I should have passed out. Knew I should breathe, but I couldn't make my chest relax enough, couldn't unknot my stomach to let the air come in. My body was a series of vices on vices, all twisted tight till the bones cracked and sinews and muscle screamed. I was running, legs stiff like a puppet. Probably looked funny, big, bounding, awkward steps with knees that alternately locked and collapsed. Widen out the picture, and I was just one scared fool in a mass of thousands. They were all around me, ahead of me, behind me, on either side, big, bearded, indifferently armored, helmeted, axe-swinging, sword-waving, screaming, yelling, running, and falling and climbing up to charge again, always yelling at the top of their harsh voices. Up the beach, over warm sand, feet losing 3 inches of slide with every step, sand sucking at you, trying to stop you, trying to keep you from this suicidal rush. But all around was madness. Men in the lunatic rage of combat, hungry for murder, thirsty for blood that would drench the sand. Not their own, of course, never their own, because what fool ever goes into war expecting that he will be the one to die? The movie in your head has you as the hero, bravely whacking away at the bad guys, courage without the sight of your own intestines spilled out in the buttery sunlight. That wasn't my movie. I'm not a romantic. I ran. David ran. He was beside me a few feet away. We wobbled one way or the other, back and forth, nearer and farther. On David's right, hanging back, sensible person that he was, Jaleel. April, back on the boats, back on the Viking longboats that had been beached like so many confused whales all down the strand. She had a pass. She was a girl. She had a uterus, so she didn't have to fight. Couldn't, not according to the Vikings. So she was on the boat. Safe? Not if we lost. But if we won, yeah, safe. Out of it. Sipping bad Viking ale and eating roasted lamb and watching us as if she were in a skybox at the Super Bowl, thinking what damned fools we were. If I'd had room in my head for any emotion beside fear, I'd have felt jealous. But fear was filling every wrinkle and knob of my brain. Fear soaked through the gray matter that at other times concerned itself with passing tests and getting girls and avoiding speeding tickets and coming up with clever one-liners that made everyone laugh. Ah, ha, ha. That Christopher is so funny. Man, he's funny. I mean, he really is. That's me. Funny, funny Christopher. Want to know what's funny? Funny is a high school junior surrounded by sweat-reeking wild men waving a sword and rushing at a bunch of Aztecs. That's funny. Aztecs. Mexica. Those were their official names. Flesh eaters, blood drinkers, man burners, heart thieves. The Vikings have all kinds of names for them. The Vikings think the Aztecs are a bunch of crazed psycho killers in the service of an evil god. And it's not like the Vikings are a bunch of altar guild ladies from the local Baptist church. The Aztecs were ahead of us in a line. They looked ludicrous. They wore feather headdresses. They disguised themselves as eagles. They disguised themselves as jaguars. They carried shields made out of sticks. Their swords looked vicious enough, like snouts of sawfishes, but then you realize they were just hardwood with sharp chips of black rock embedded in the edge. Not much use against the steel sword, even the rusty dented tin can things the Vikings used. But the Vikings had another weapon. Short spears they flung with the aid of a notched stick. We'd been warned about those. So that's where I was, running toward a solid wall of Aztecs on a mission to chop off the head of their god, Huitzilopochtli, and bring it back to Loki, so that he'd free Odin. Makes perfect sense, I muttered through chattering teeth, bounding stiffly, sliding and trying to keep from falling on my own sword. Suddenly, from down the line, a big black Viking named Olaf Ironfoot started yelling, "Mjolnir! Mjolnir!" We hit the Aztec line. 2 lines of men slammed together, literally, physically, so that you could hear shields grinding on shields and chests against chests and swords and axes all flailing wildly. I was behind David. Some Aztec swung at him. David ducked. Then he drove his own sword into the feathered man and lurched away. The Aztec fell. Not dead. Yet. But with blood and something black coming through the hands that called at his belly. There was a sound coming from me, a noise, a moan like a wounded animal, repetitive, wordless, coming out of my throat and me having no control, no choice but to make that sound. I was muscled aside by Thorolf, a Viking who'd taken charge of us. Thorolf was yelling, bellowing, roaring, swinging the big axe he carried up over his head and bringing it down like he was Abe Lincoln splitting rails. I was down. Sand in my mouth, wind knocked out of me. What had happened? Was I cut? Was I hurt? I dropped my sword, rolled onto my back, slapped myself frantically with my hand, looking for the wound, but couldn't see. Something in my eyes. Blood. I'd been hit in the head. Was I dying? Feet stamped the sand all around me. A kick. Rolled over on my side, dizzy, wiped the blood out of my eyes. Fingers grazed a cut on my scalp. Sickness washed over me as I realized I'd just touched my own skull. I'd never seen what hit me, and now I was in the rear, the Vikings pushing the Aztecs back, steel weapons versus obsidian and wood and bone. Mjolnir, Mjolnir, the Vikings bellowed till it became a constant background roar. Loud as a CTA train rushing by, almost drowning out the cries of rage and pain. Mjolnir, the hammer of Thor. The Aztecs were on the run, back toward the tall golden walls of the city they called New Tenochtitlan, back toward the distant stepped pyramid that towered above those walls. I made it to my feet, tripped, staggered, caught myself, stopped, went back for my sword. Blood was in my eyes again, so my hands so wet with it that I couldn't clear my vision. Mjolnir, Mjolnir! David was gone, Jaleel barely visible, just his head surrounded by Vikings twice his size. Could I go back to the boats? I was injured, wasn't I? And I saw a Viking, an Asian guy with a short obsidian throwing spear sticking out of his upper thigh. He was staggering forward, yelling like all the others. Guess not, I muttered. Besides, we were winning. The Aztecs were on the run. As long as I didn't run too fast, I probably wouldn't catch them. I saw a flash of David, just his head. He was stopped, staring. And through the Vikings, like an ice-cold wind, the terror blew. The cries of Mjolnir died away, replaced by the low animal moan that men make when they are afraid. Deep down inside, afraid. I knew that sound. I'd been making that sound. I'm tall. Taller than David or Jaleel, not as tall as a lot of the Vikings, but tall enough that from the back of the mob, standing on a slight rise in the sand, I could see the pyramid. It was impossibly, absurdly high, like it had been drawn by an artist with no sense of perspective. Atop the pyramid on a flat platform was a temple, an open building on the front side and yet dark within despite the bright morning sun. From that temple stepped a creature out of a madman's nightmare. He was huge, almost as tall as the temple itself, and somehow, in defiance of all logic, his shadow fell across us. We must have been a half-mile away, but his shadow fell across us, across me, the darkness, the cold reaching deep inside me. He was mostly blue, with broad, horizontal yellow stripes across his face. The blue was the blue of a late afternoon sky. The yellow was the yellow of unpolished gold. There were burning stars in his eyes, a burning mirror in one hand, a monstrous green snake in the other. Huitzilopochtli, Aztec god. We had come, armed with Mjolnir, to cut off his head and deliver it to Loki. Not happening, I said. Huitzilopochtli grew wings, fabulous rainbow wings that spread wider than 1,000 eagles. He flew from the top of the pyramid and swooped down toward us. Impossible, of course. Nothing that big could fly. It violated the laws of physics. That's what Jaleel would have said. Impossible anywhere in the universe. Only this wasn't the universe. This was Everworld. All right. Thank you for joining me today. That's it for now. I will see y'all on Sunday night for bedtime stories. Can't wait to get going and learn about Christopher's perspective in all of this. Yeah? Bye.